The Flowers of Buffoonery by Osamu Dazai is a 1935 novella. It is predates the his most famous work, probably and darkest, uh, No Longer Human, and it is it is a lot more. I think I wait. Did I say it predated 13 years? I didn't even finish that sentence. Sorry, but yeah, it predated. I think Osmodose, like kind of the characters from this, was teasing around the idea of being in like or he might have actually become a fully fledged or Moonlight, at least as a cartoonist artist, to some kind of visual artist, and that is reflected in the character of Yozo. And this is a very interesting kind of narrative, the way it's framed, because right off the bat it starts out with a Yozo. He's the kind of main character, and it's from the point of view and right off the bat, we hear from the kind of omniscient kind of third person narrator who's like kind of like um, almost kind of it's like sleep is kind of slipping in and out of Yozo's thoughts, and it's like an interesting kind of thing because he's like talking in a very knowledgeable but like at the same time very he is uh, you know chiding himself on being too wordy or not being original enough or like choosing the first person he's chiding himself on using a first person narrative, and then he starts talking about like those days in the sanatorium where he wakes up, which also gives me Magic Mountain vibes from Thomas Mann. Just the fact that people are put in this sanatorium for the kind of purpose of rehabilitation and slow convalescence, basically, and they stay there for a while. And it's like it turns out to be an extended kind of thing. And it's like it no longer has to do with about the mental health, and it's like more about the relationships formed there, which turned out to be very formative for Yozo. And he, he basically wakes up in this place, and I like how I don't have the quotes in front of me because the internet's actually off, but I do remember one quote. He said something to the effect of like, "Welcome to loneliness, population 1," which I really like that. Because it switches back and forth between it's a lot less, at least from the offset, like a lot less morbid and like and very dark and like um horrifically kind of like very like that No Longer Human was, and that's right in the title too. So let's use my cat. Should just get out of her system. But yeah, that's right in the title, and like basically this kind of switch back and forth. There's like a kind of like push pull kind of slippery slope between like this kind of buoyant kind of optimism, but like even the optimism is kind of like between. That's why it's called the Flowers of Buffoonery. That's actually the he mentions that phrase Yozo sometime down the novel. I believe near the end of it, and it's basically this kind of switch back and forth between he'll be like up in a like a really good mood, and he'll be like, oh well, like putting on jokes, and like all his friends and him kind of just joke around. They take things lightly, and they're always kind of tongue in cheek and just kind of responding to every like even the most serious things with just kind of like just like a kind of wry kind of jokes and little flippant comments and remarks, and it's just like, and you can't blame them in one sense because it's like judging from the severity of some of the stuff that they've done. Like this is literally like this is right after Yozo wakes up kind of in media res in the hospital, and in his I think his wife or his lover Soba, I think her name Sova, she actually died in the suicide pact, which is something that exactly happened to Osmodaze himself. That he and his lover was like kind of a, um, I don't know if it was just the one time that when he died 38, right after he wrote No Longer Human in 1938. I think he was almost 40, and yet I think he jumped into the water, and like him and his lover, I think, but I don't know if it was. I'd have to read up on that because I could have swore like it was like kind of like just like what happened with the character of Yozo, but yeah, so he basically is like kind of trying. Obviously, he's probably tormented by her death and lives with a lot of guilt, but he's like keeps it under the surface, and he puts on like kind of this facade of buffoonery and just kind of and just to kind of cope with it. And um, so him and his friends do that, and there's his brother also visits at one point because he's like, you've made a horrible name to our family, and he's very disappointed, and he's like kind of, he seems to be like kind of a spitting image of like what our Yozo isn't, like the brother's kind of like more talented or more resourceful, and like here Yozo is, and he can't even, he's trying to at one point paint he's thinks of himself as like a visual artist of some kind, like a painter, and he's like trying to make a kind of I believe a oil painting of the sea of like one of the Japanese out there, like I don't know if it's like what river it is, but or it might have been the what was it, one of the mountains or something, the Fuji, yeah, the Fuji, so I think, and he's like so like ashamed of it that he like tears it up. So yeah, that's kind of a relatable kind of moment, but that kind of classic like perfectionism kind of streak. But yeah, so Yozo is trying to become something of an artist, and it kind of goes back and forth between flashbacks, and again we have this narrator who's is pretty much, I think, is Yozo too, but like through the first person, they're connected somehow, but like he's like constantly going back and forth between like, oh, it's not good enough, and there's like like how does this, but like he goes back down into the dips, and then really like he kind of goes down underneath the surface of like that kind of like very just super like negative, like pessimistic, like caustic kind of acrimony and bilious. He's just like so much bile throughout like what he says, like some of the time, like he'll like at one point like he does actually say something like what is it like to move on in this world, to like put on a mask like this, to be like no longer human, like that would that's what one would have to become to like be able to like live without a conscience, and like that's kind of, he's like touching at certain things. And now that's kind of like, then he brings himself back up to the top, and he's like, okay, back to our buffoonery again. So he like kind of oscillates between that, and it's like kind of an interesting thing. Kind of remind me a little bit of Italo Calvino's A Traveler, or Phone on Winter's Night, A Traveler, which has kind of a similar kind of back and forth where he's like, but that's more kind of structured in a long kind of novel based thing, but it's like a novel about writing novels, and there's like different, like it's like it's about like a novel about beginnings of other novels, and in first chapters, and in defects with the first chapters. But I'm gonna try to get to that in the next time. But yeah, so yeah, Yozo, and basically it ends with him and his friends. They're all trying to kind of get together, and one thing that they do that's kind of sincere is like they're going out trying to walk out and on hike on like a mountain area, and they're trying to go up the Fuji. I think it's Fuji Mountain. It's a pretty big kind of peak in Japan. But while they're going up, they're trying to look down and get a good view of the sea. But the fog is like encompassing everything, so it's like it like meshes everything with this like nebula, and they're like it ends on that note. So I think that's like kind of a little bit more of an optimistic thing, where it's like kind of like there's hope for the future, and there's like I think that's all I have. I'm kind of used to like, at least having some kind of reference point of notes and stuff, but not today though. I'm just like totally off the cuff. But yeah, so I think that's all I have for Osamu Dazai's Flowers of Buffoonery. I definitely recommend it. I don't know what order you would want to take that in. Like, I don't know if it would be like read this first and then, because I think No Longer Human at once it's pretty dark, almost too dark to get into. But then again, it's like you might want to ease yourself in with this. But then again, that's what I started with. And there's also the Setting Sun too. The Setting Sun was a little bit. It's more about, I almost forget, because it was like I read it right after I did. I should have waited a little bit to read it, but I read it like kind of in a hurry at the time, because I wanted to kind of, I don't know. But yeah, that has to do with a kind of a more domestic kind of how framed like housewife, and then I do remember the guillotine, she, like the one drunken kind of uh a bunch of like stooges at the bar that they're kind of always repeating that phrase and childishly, and it's like kind of like it's almost like what I'd imagine Yozo would be if he went down kind of a more just down the buffoon strict like kind of drunken path, and just like and but maybe lost 100 or maybe lost about 10 IQ points. But yeah, that I definitely want to kind of give that a reread, because all these are this trilogy that I mentioned, obviously there's more Dazai, I'm sure, but this trio that I mentioned is pretty much all pretty easy to read. They're around the same length, so yeah. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next one.